Okay, chapter 13. So, the house has landed, ready at the Hopscotch Championship, do you remember? And we've just found out that Bonehead used to be a wizard and he died. He's a skeleton because he died at a Hopscotch Championship. So there's more mystery to this, isn't there? We think it's just a, it's a Hopscotch Championship. Yeah, easy. You hopscotch, you win a trophy. No, there's something dark to this championship. So we need to find out, is this going to be risky? And now we also know that Nine has her own questions. So she might even be contemplating taking part herself to win and ask the tower at the edge of time her own question. So, chapter 13. The portrait swung wildly as she ran down to the front door. The tingling in the air made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She was about to set foot in another world, and one full of wizards, witches, magic and hopscotch. Eric, Spoon and Flabbergast stood in the hall, the wizard wearing his indigo hat and star-speckled indigo cloak. He opened the front door and they were greeted by a wave of deafening noise, laughing, talking, cheering, a brass band and the occasional explosion. Flabbergast took a deep breath. He held his head high and marched out, Spoon trotting beside him. Eric stood in the doorway, looking at the door, clutching his feather duster and wringing his tail. So Eric's wringing his tail. Now he does that when he's got a particular emotion. So what do we think about Eric? Does he really want to go to this championship? Or do you think he's a little bit nervous, a little bit anxious? Maybe he's got reason to be. Maybe he was there when Bonehead died. Oh, for goodness sake, muttered Nine as she came up behind him. She nudged Eric outside and shut the door behind her. You're safer out here than you are in this house. She turned to look back at the house. The windows were rattling as the house held its breath. Nine wondered how long it could last. Another roof tile fell off and landed by Nine's feet, and the chimney pot wobbled dangerously from side to side. Bonehead stared out of the window with lifeless eyes and waved stiffly to her. Nine gave a little wave back. Perfectly normal waving to a skeleton in your bedroom. Perfectly normal, she told herself. I finish the hopscotch. I make it to the tower. I ask my question. We save the house, Flabbergast muttered to himself. Nine looked him up and down. Perfect. What could possibly go wrong? Just one question. Why on earth are you still wearing your slippers? Flabbergast looked down and grimaced. Ah! He turned around quickly. I'll just... The front door shut itself and there was a smug-sounding locking noise. Never mind, said Flabbergast as he sang through gritted teeth. Welcome to Tuesday. A middle-aged witch in a puffy crinoline dress and velvet cloak glided past effortlessly. She looked at the vibrating house. She looked at Eric with his duster and at Flabbergast with his slippers. Flabbergast gave her a very fake grin. Morning! She snorted in disgust and she flew on. Flabbergast grabbed Eric's duster and stuffed it in the letterbox mounted on the outside of the house. Leave it there, he hissed, or they'll laugh at you. Can you do that? Nine asked, watching the gliding witch. Can you fly too? Flying is highly overrated, said Flabbergast. A huge red urn about half the size of the front door hovered in the air above them. The urn was decorated randomly with golden numbers from 1 to 10. As Nine watched it float around, the lid rose up above the urn and the familiar voice of the message which droned out. 10 minutes until the championship begins. The championship begins in 10 minutes. The red urn floated on, repeating its message to others. Marvellous, murmured Flabbergast with all the enthusiasm of a squashed frog. Just in time. A swoosh of witches and wizards swept past in the air. Excited chattering came from everywhere. Flabbergast led them towards a large crowd. A square arena was marked out in bunting. each triangle displaying a single number. At the far end stood a raised platform, on which there were 3 wooden chairs and a long table with a huge scroll on it. A short distance in front of it was a long golden line with flagpoles bearing hopscotch grid flags at either end. This place was colourful. It was chaotic and unlike anything Nine had ever seen before. The closest she could think of was the hustling, bustling street market where she used to pickpocket before she joined the house. But the cobbled stones, the buildings and the stalls all seemed dull in comparison to this. Then a strange and terrible and curious thought pricked her mind. The last time she had pickpocketed, it had been a witch. She'd ended up with the miniature house, which had popped up to become the home she now lived in. How about the witches and the wizards here? What amazing things did they have in their pockets? All the pushing and shoving, surely they wouldn't even notice her swift fingers of a clever thief. Nine pushed the thought away as she stopped at the fringe of the crowd. "Where's the tower?" "You find it when you complete the hopscotch," said Flabbergast. "I have been in a couple of times before. Once in 1831, which did not go to plan, and once in 1835, which did. The year I was champion, and Gazillion was..." He looked around shiftily. "A turnip, for some unknown reason." She saw a kiosk with a long queue of impatient-looking witches and wizards, twisting their necks towards the throng of swooshing witches and wizards. What are they doing? "Queuing for Magis," said Flabbergast. "Magis? What's Magis?" "Magic and ice, madam," Flabbergast snapped. He pulled his indigo hat lower over his face and dipped his head. Nine's eyes widened. She watched as a wizard walked away from the kiosk with a lilac cone in her hand. On top of the cone was a little blue flickering flame. The witch held out her hand, and golden sparks shot from her fingertips onto the flame. For a moment the flame expanded and then exploded, and then in its place were piled 2 round scoops of green ice cream. The witch licked it and merged it into the crowd. The witch licked it and merged into the crowd. I'm not sure about eating magic," said Nine, wrinkling her nose. A witch floated by, holding a stick with what looked like sky blue candy floss, except it was fizzing and sparkling. "Well, what about that?" "Best not. Fizzle floss is bad for your teeth, madam," said Flabbergast, looking over his shoulder. "And your elbows." "Your elbows?" Nine's stomach rumbled. "Well, what can I eat?" A young pink-haired wizard floated by, holding a tray with rows of identical-looking donuts. Flabbergast waved him down and handed over some coins and took 4 donuts. "A donut?" Nine said, examining hers. "What's inside?" "A don't know nut," corrected Flabbergast, looking shiftily around. "And it's a surprise." "Oh, good," growled Spoon. Eric gulped down the donut in one go. He went pale and shivery, then red and then sweaty, and then returned to normal Eric. "Ah, an ice and spice," said Flabbergast. Spoon nibbled his donut suspiciously, then started floating up into the air. Flabbergast grabbed his leg and pulled him back down, as Spoon desperately tried to hold his kilt close to him. "Oh, an extra light!" Nine took a bite of her soft, doughy outside, and then felt something small and weird jumping around inside her mouth. She froze for a moment, then spat it out. Something like a red berry with legs and a snapping mouth scuttled away, snarling. "Ah, jawberry scram!" said Flabbergast, as Nine cautiously finished the now safe donut. "Bad luck, madam!" He bit into his donut, and a gush of green goo squirted up into his face. A group of witches and wizards floated by and gave Flabbergast a disapproving look. "Morning," he muttered, smiling through the goo. "Pathetic," muttered one of the witches. "Oh," said another. "Wasn't he involved in that dreadful incident in 1831? Flabbergast's smile dropped as they floated on. He looked nervous. "Listen, madam, I'm beginning to think I'm coming here might have been a bit of a mistake," he said in a low voice. His eyes were wide and pleading. "You need the answer from the tower," said Nine, frowning. "And I thought hopscotch meant everything to you." "Yes, well, now I'm here," he swallowed hard. "I know we need to cure the house's hiccups, but there might be another way." Whoomp! There was a strange whoosh as an energy behind them. Nine and the others spun round and stared. The house has disappeared. "Aye, and it's pity you weren't inside it then, you fool," said Spoon, hopping up onto Nine's shoulder. "Better a fool than a failure," said Flabbergast. "Better a fool than a failure," said Flabbergast. Whoop. The house reappeared again, still vibrating. One window was smashed, and the roof was dripping in sickly olive-coloured slime. Nine glanced up at her bedroom window. Bonehead raised a bony thumbs up. Nine turned back to see Flabbergast standing frozen to the spot. He turned paler than his china teacups, and his eyes were now fixed on a hooded figure descending from the skies. The figure landed beside them in a swirl of emerald cloak, and as a hand with green painted nails emerged from under the cloak's folds, Flabbergast could only make a high-pitched, strangled squeak. "Ah!" And that takes us to the end of that chapter. Who do you think the green cloaked wizard or witch is? What has made Flabbergast look so unnerved? And I wonder if any of you are drawing this at home. I thought that was a really nice image to think of the house covered in sickly gloop. So where is it? It is and how now, like, the house looking a little dilapidated. It's had really bad hiccups. So we've now gone from this like beautiful eccentric house. You know what a house looks like. You know, it's got like towers, turrets sticking out everywhere. But now it's got a window is smashed. There's roof tiles falling from the top, and there's a bedroom window that is now smashed. I know I've said that already, but it was covered in sickly olive-coloured slime. I just think that makes a really nice image. If anyone is drawing, I would love to see your pictures. And that will take us to chapter 14.